Hi everybody, we're back for American Iron Gym's podcast. I'm Chad Ikes, Tammy Lopes, Jesse Anderson, and today we're going to show you how to squat, which is a movement that powerlifters have mastered for efficiency and strength. And I think we all feel that it's a movement that gets understated for everybody that lifts weights, from quality of life to athletes to powerlifters, just about everybody.
I think more and more athletes are using it as a primary movement to improve their performance in their sport. But I think where it's not utilized enough is by normal populace, people that may not be training for a competition, but to improve their function of daily living, because it does apply. It applies to everyone. Do you agree, Chad?
I think you see a lot of gyms where people tend to build their anterior chain and what they see in the mirror. But in functional life, those muscles aren't as important as the stuff they don't see, which is their whole posterior chain, from their hamstrings to their glutes to their back to their upper back.
So Chad, define anterior and posterior chain, because I think that's something that we use, but I don't think it's used out there in a lot of conversations in the world. So
basically, anterior chain is what you see in the mirror. Posterior chain is what you don't see. Posterior chain is everything behind you. Anterior is everything in front. Both of which are important, but I think posterior gets understated a lot, especially for quality of life.
And do you agree that things like deadlifts and squats probably work more core than anything you could possibly do by isolating the core, like planks or sit-ups or any of that?
Yeah, without a doubt. Because again, if you're talking an athlete, they're doing all kinds of crazy movements that aren't individual one muscle group movements. And in everyday life, you're not doing always one particular movement. You're bending, you're twisting. You have to do those things to live. And this is going to incorporate everything in a movement, which is going to be more efficient for daily living.
Stability, right? I don't think there's a movement that creates more stability than a squat. And one of the things that research has told us is that squats are one of the main movements that can prevent or actually reverse osteoporosis, because of the compression, the weight on the back and the spine. It increases calcification all the way down. So it's a great movement as we age for preventing aging.
Very simply, your body responds to stimulus.
Absolutely.
If you stress your body, your ligaments are going to get stronger, your tendons are going to get stronger, your bones are going to get denser.
Right, you're going to have more
those
balance.
Are all things that decrease as you get older. Well, you can kind of reverse that through lifting.
So less chance of hip injuries, right?
Right.
And they used to say, oh my gosh, don't squat, it will cause knee injuries. If you squat incorrectly, that's absolutely the truth. It can increase a knee injury, just like anything you do incorrectly. But if you squat correctly, it will actually prevent knee injuries. And for those of us that have had knee injuries, it allows us to be more functional even with those aging injuries. So Chad's really one of the foremost experts on squats. What do you squat?
My best official squat was 1173.
1,173
I had a really
pounds.
close one at 1221, which would have been the world record.
Right. And Jesse now, at 21 years old, just squatted over 900 pounds. So what we're going to show you isn't just for a power lifter that squats around 1,000 pounds. These techniques apply to anyone, from the person who's just learning to do the squat. We're going to teach you how to do that correctly, be more effective and efficient. And the thing that you're going to learn by doing squats correctly, you're going to be able to translate that to movements in daily living, whether it's reaching down and picking something up or squatting down with something in your arms. It applies to all of that.
I think first we're going to start with bar placement. The most efficient bar placement, you want it lower on your back and you want it riding right over your rear delts. A lot of guys, especially bodybuilders, like to keep that bar really high, and you can do some specialty movements for that, but it is a little hard on your cervical spine. This gives you a much broader area for the weight to sit on your back, which disperses the weight a lot better. Before he picks his bar up, he's going to squeeze his traps, his rhomboids, and everything. He's trying to squeeze his shoulder blades as if there's a quarter behind there. So if you can see, he's going to squeeze like this and then up just slightly. And it actually locks the shelf where that bar will sit and you don't have to worry about it sliding or moving on your back, as long as you stay tight. And if you can see how he stepped out, you want your walkout to be as efficient as possible. So if you can cut it down to 2 or 3 steps is all you really need to get in that position. Now, one of the things I want to talk about right now and make Jesse hold that weight is foot placement. You see a lot of people will squat really narrow. I think it's best to go at shoulder width apart. Jesse's a little wider than that, which is fine too. A lot of times, you can rack it if you want. A lot of times when guys, you'll see Olympic lifters squat really narrow. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it kind of changes the positioning of the squat. And I feel this is better for your joints and your knees if you go a little bit wider. But that's varying opinions on that. Okay, and I'm going to talk really quickly about people call it your core, I call it your abdomen and your obliques. One thing that powerlifters have done is we've mastered learning how to breathe into our bellies. And what that does is that creates this huge stability around your midsection and less chance of injuries to your back. But it's a little bit of an art form, and it takes a little while to get used to. But basically what you're doing is instead of going and breathing in your chest, you're going to go and breathe into your belly, and then you're going to push it out. So I'm basically going all the air into my belly, flexing my abs and pushing my diaphragm. And I'm creating this core right here where my upper body doesn't want to move and my midsection doesn't want to move. And I'm going to hold that whole breath through my squat. And actually with Jesse, before he even picks the bar up, he'll take that air and push his abs out. Then he'll step back, get in position, then he can take another breath before the squat. So right there, he got his big breath. He's going to pick it up. That's 1, 2 steps, and he's actually in position. You don't have to take like 5 steps to get back. Now from this position, he's going to sit his butt back a little bit. Actually, he's going to start a squat. Once he takes a step right here, he's getting in the setup position. So his hips are back. He's getting his low back arched. He's flexing every muscle in his body. Then he's going to take one more big breath. And he's going to start the movement by pushing his glutes or his butt back. Go ahead and do one more. And you can watch how he's pushing his butt back, he's driving his knees out, and he's staying tight and building pressure throughout the whole lift. And go ahead and rack it. So to see that squat from the side, you're going to start in this position right here, where my back is arched up, my whole back is tight. I'm going to take that one last breath. Then I'm going to sit, my movement's actually going to start with my butt going back, pushing my knees out, squat down into the hole, and then back up. And that's, ideally, I like to have my shins straight up and down. Depending on your stance and build, you may actually come forward a little bit like this, but basically you never want to be over the ball of your foot because that's going to add a lot more stress to your knees that you don't want.
Let's talk a little bit about a different way to get that air, because that was always a really hard thing for me to intellectualize on how to accomplish. And another great power lifter and genius, Chris Duffin, kind of described it in a slightly different way. For me, made sense. And I know you're saying, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm not lifting 900 or 1,000 pounds. But it does apply to you, because if you can keep your core tight in lifting things in life, you are less likely to get injured.
And I got to say, when I pick anything up, it's such a habit for me.
Right.
If I'm picking a package up off the floor, it's such a habit that I always fill my abs and push them out without even thinking about it at this point. And most people get hurt doing the slightest movements. It's not even the really heavy stuff that they get hurt with because they're not thinking about it. But if you train this and do this and make it natural, you'll get to where you'll do it all the time.
Absolutely. It's just a habit. It's part of your movement pattern.
A lot of people talk about lower back pain as well. And I feel like bracing that core, I mean, because if you brace your core, you can't really round your lower back.
Right, it's going to hold your lower back in a better position.
Exactly, which causes you to basically eliminate that lower back pain.
A lot more back health, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're working your core.
Describe it for us how Chris did.
So one of the things that Chris said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this is what I understood, is that you shorten through here. So you're compressing everything together, and then you're taking that breath into your lower abdomen, not just your chest, but your lower abdomen. And for me, I cannot move, I can't disengage my upper body. The other thing for me that does, and I'm structurally built different than you, so obviously, right? It allowed me to engage more posterior chain than it does with pushing my belly out. It's almost like I loosen in my posterior chain. So like I said at the beginning, and Chad and I both said, and Jesse said, that we're going to have very different ways of doing things. And there's no right or wrong way. It's finding out what works for your body. So we're going to really try to give you a variable kind of solution for accomplishing the same thing.
Yeah, there's also a lot of times where it's a very similar thing, but it's said with different cues, and different cues hit each person individually.
Absolutely.
Like I could say something one way, Tammy could say something another way, and Jesse may understand it the way Tammy said it and be lost with the way I said it, even though it's the same thing.
So one of the other things, Chad, that you told me that really, really helped with my squats and just reaching down for something because of the knee issues that I have, it really helped was the talon. And how you explained it to me is thinking of your feet as that talon. And as soon as I curl my big toe, my pinky, and visualize my heel as having a talon, I immediately engage my core without thinking about it and my posterior chain, my glutes, immediately. So that is a lot easier for me to think about doing than the 12 other steps to get everything else engaged, right? That was an amazing tool. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that.
I think that it just basically goes, there, you hear people describe it a lot of differently. Some people say split the floor. Some people say drive like you're trying to push the floor down. But this way is based on the fact that we actually have two major arches in our foot. We have the one that comes up here like this, and there's actually another one that goes like this. So you really have a point here, and a point here that touches the ground. So it's like three talons. And what I do before I start is I take those talons and I try to twist like this. And what that's doing is it's forcing my knees out, it's engaging my glutes. And when you squat, you want everything tight before this movement. So like when I'm up here, everything is tight. My back's tight, my low back's tight, my quads are tight, my hamstrings are tight, my glutes are tight. And if I do this twist, as soon as I start to squat, my knees are already going to want to go out. And all I got to do is just follow back and then come back up. So that's one little cue that just ties all these other things in so you don't have to think about every single one of them.
Okay. So on someone who squats a little narrower, which would be more of someone who's just coming in to train and work on strength, what are some of the things that they have to keep in mind?
For me, I don't necessarily like narrow squatting. If you're a bodybuilder and you're trying to build your thighs.
But there are other sports too that they want to focus more on that movement because it replicates things that they do in their sports. So with honoring that, how would you go about teaching someone that squats
First of
narrower.
all, no matter what the position is, I would try to go at least shoulder width. I would
Absolutely.
never go inside shoulder width,
Okay,
ever.
all right.
Because
Why?
it just puts you in a harder position, and you're going to have to keep your knee. You're going to have to let
have
your
that.
knees get forward. So you're going to do anything gain from it. I think you're going to lose on damage to your knees. And just because even if you're in this position as an athlete, doesn't mean you can't train here, work your posterior chain to be safer on your joints. You're still working the same muscle groups. I mean, anything they're actually doing here, they're going to do on the field anyway.
Okay,
And in the gym, you're working on strength and reducing injuries or keeping away injuries while gaining strength.
okay. What
So
about,
to me, it's not worth the risk.
what about someone who's jumping? They want to increase their vertical. And so they came to us and said, okay, I want to be in my vertical position right when I squat. How do you respond to that?
I would go, we're going to work that position when we're doing plyometrics. Right now, we're working your glutes and your hamstrings.
Okay.
And I want to do that in the safest way possible.
All right, very good. Thanks, Chad. That's why I like these discussions, because these are all the questions we get when people come into the gym. And I think it's a wonderful way to maybe give people a different perspective on
Right.
things and why we do things the way that we do them. And ultimately, it's for their safety and giving them the greatest potential of strength,
Right.
growth, along with doing it safe, right?
Yeah.
And effect in their sport, no matter what that sport is.
Right. And I think lifting can help every sport. And I think you've seen that in the last 50 years, especially. It's gotten very there was a time when baseball players didn't lift weights because they thought they'd be too bulky and it would mess their game up. Now, they all lift weights.
They all lift weights.
And
right?
they're stronger, they're faster, they're doing better with injuries. I mean, there's not a sport it doesn't help. Swimmers lift weights.
Yep. I actually don't know of a sport, even golfers now lift weights, right?
I think ping pong players lift weights.
Yeah, I can't challenge that. Okay, that's great. Anything else you want to say? Maybe some auxiliary movements that you would recommend?
A couple of the main things that I see, or a few of the main things that I see. First of all is letting your knees come in. You see a lot of guys, when they get down in the hole, they're here and they go, and come up with it. That's absolutely horrible for your knees. It's horrible for your knees, and you really lose power by letting that happen. And your hips, for that matter. The other thing is coming down. When you get to the hole, you go and stick your butt up and then come up. That's really, really bad for your back. What other main ones do you see that? Those are like the main two that I see that are just absolutely horrible.
The one thing that I see a lot of people do when they first come in and really haven't done a lot of squats is they put the bar right over that C7,
way
T1
up on your
area,
neck.
and that's really dangerous because that particular vertebrae is pretty superficial and you can cause some spinal damage. So getting people to lower that bar. The other thing that putting the bar so high does is just what you said earlier, is it tends to make you come forward
Tends
with
to roll
your
you
shoulder.
forward, and you have all that massive amount of weight on a space that's this big when you could have it on a space that's this big.
And the other thing,
Displace it.
the other thing that I see people do on a regular basis incorrectly is they're on their toes and they don't have a platform. And typically that's because their Achilles and calves are so tight.
Right.
They can't squat down without coming forward and getting on their toes. And that causes a lot of shear stress on your knees. And like you said
Yes.
before, that's where I think squats have gotten such a bad rap from, you know,
Poor technique. The
Poor
squat is a
technique.
good movement. I squatted 1,200 pounds. I actually had MRIs in my hip, and the doctor said I have the hips of a 20-year-old.
and knees, yes.
So it's kind of hard to say that it's bad on your
Right,
joints when
right.
I did it. But I was a technician. I was very picky about my technique the whole time.
And a lot of people have pre-existing injuries to hips and knees, and they're finding now that squatting, it depends on the injury, of course, and the person, but squatting doesn't necessarily make those worse. It actually can
help.
make them better. So obviously you're going to want to talk to your physician or your physical therapist and get their recommendation prior to starting any exercise program or introducing a new exercise, a form of exercise.
Another thing I will say that I see people do is people seem to think that the eccentric phase or the down phase of the squat isn't important. Like before they even go down, they're already thinking about coming up. Well, going down is huge importance to the squat. And it's basically the setup for the whole squat. So if you come down really loose and you're out of position, you're going to be in the wrong position at the bottom. You actually want to create tension and build pressure as you go down and force your body into the position you want. So you're going and just building pressure as you go down, making the weight build more pressure.
It's almost like compressing a spring, right?
It's exactly
that
like
force.
a coil spring.
Yep.
And the more you push, the tighter it gets, and the tighter it gets, and the tighter it gets, and the tighter it gets. Well, that's your muscles getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and that's your system, your core building up pressure that's going to explode back up. And explode up in the proper position. If you stay loose and all of a sudden you're trying to come up, your body's going to shoot in all kinds of bad positions.
So we talked about some of the things that people commonly do wrong. And what are the contributors to that? Some of it is not knowing how to do things correctly, but I also think that a lot of times it's from being tight in certain areas and also being weak in certain areas. So what would you recommend for someone to do with their squats to work their legs and core and hip and that posterior chain to be able to do this movement functionally and
I think
effectively?
you hit on the first one, which is knowledge. It's well worth spending the money to go to a seminar, get a knowledgeable trainer, come to a gym like American Iron where there's people that know. Flexibility is a really, really big one. A lot of people can't get into proper position because they're way too tight, and their body's not going to let them get in the proper position.
Do you stretch?
I stretch all the time, and I'm surprisingly flexible for a big guy.
Yes, you are. Yep. It's pretty impressive. Absolutely.
And then weaknesses, but again, weaknesses go to knowledge. There's a lot of people out there that will go, oh, this is weak, or oh, this is weak, but they really don't know. You know, a lot of casual lifters have no real muscle control or knowledge about the body. And that's another thing, again, if you can get the chance to squat with somebody that knows, they can pick up a lot of different things you can work on really quick.
Thank you, Chad. I think that was incredibly informative. Thank you, Jesse. We always appreciate you being our model and demonstrate perfect form. And I want to thank you for joining us. We had a great time today talking about the squat, and our next podcast is going to be on the bench. So hopefully we can bring you information that will make your life better and your lifting better.
We'll see you next Monday at 6 a.m. Everybody wants to bench big, so tune in.